Hi everyone. Happy Tuesday. I'm finally getting some snow here in Jackson Hole where I live. We're having a very late winter. I don't know what it's like in the rest of the country, but I know in the West we are very behind in snow, which is really weird, but it's okay. I know that it is coming soon enough. All right, today I'm excited to talk about how to eat well to sleep well. And I have updated this to include quite a bit of information, so I hope it is really helpful for you. Diet is a huge part of our health and of sleep. So if you haven't been eating well, haven't been eating healthy for a while, then it is contributing to your sleep issues because it's affecting your health. And I just want you to know that there is a difference between eating healthy and eating right for your body. And I have lots of clients who tell me that they eat healthy. And, that typically means they focus on organic and they don't eat a lot of refined sugar and processed foods. And that's definitely part of it, but there is a lot more to it. And really, each of us is unique. Our bodies need different nutrients, different foods. They don't like some foods. And so there isn't one right diet for everyone. And so part of what I do with my clients is really help find their ideal perfect diet that's going to keep them in good health, in balance, so that they don't get out of balance again and their sleep deteriorates again. Now, I do also want to mention that I don't think that we also need to obsess about diet. I definitely don't recommend counting calories, grams of anything. Food is something to be enjoyed. And I will tell you that I have been eating gluten free, dairy free, egg free for months now, and I still eat great. I love food. I am a foodie. I've been passionate about local, sustainable food for a long time, and I love cooking. I love food. And so you can still eat well even if you can't eat the same way that the standard American diet allows. So, I'm going to be talking about food sensitivities, about blood sugar, about how to find your ideal macronutrient balance. So, that's your balance of fat, protein, and carbohydrates. We're going to talk about eating nutrient dense foods, eating anti inflammatory foods, properly preparing foods like grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds, and some of the special diets that I actually recommend avoiding. So, first, I want to start with food sensitivities. And this is so important, and this is what one of the things that I test for. Because if you're eating foods you're sensitive to, it causes this constant low grade inflammation in your body. And whenever there's inflammation, your body releases cortisol because it's an anti inflammatory hormone. And if that's happening day and night, when it happens at night, cortisol is going to wake you up and make it really hard to go back to sleep. So many people are sensitive to what are called the big five foods. So that's gluten, dairy, eggs, soy, and corn. But you could also be sensitive to foods we think of as healthy, like nuts or spinach or salmon. Now, I don't necessarily think that you need to avoid foods you're sensitive to forever. My goal is always to have you eliminate those foods temporarily while we work on healing the gut so that you're able to tolerate most foods in the future. And really, I see food sensitivities. The more you have, the more unhealthy your gut is. And then the more unhealthy your gut is, the more likely a pathogen is able to take hold in your gut, and that's going to contribute even more to your insomnia. So you can really sleep better just by changing diets and avoid foods you're sensitive to. So I like to do a food sensitivity test for all of my clients because then we can quickly find out what they're reacting to. Another thing you can try is an elimination diet where you eliminate those major five foods that I talked about for at least 30 days and then see how you feel and then reintroduce them one at a time every few days and see if you have any reactions. Now that can be hard to follow, so that's why I like doing a test so then we just know quickly for sure. Okay, about blood sugar levels. So, when your blood sugar levels fluctuate, when you're on that roller coaster and they're going from extremely high to extremely low, then whenever your levels get too high, your body releases insulin, which is going to lower your blood sugar, and then your body's going to release cortisol to raise your blood sugar again, because cortisol actually releases glucose to your cells. And so if you're on that roller coaster during the day, that's going to continue into the night. And when your blood sugar levels drop too low during the night, your body's going to feel stressed. It's going to release cortisol, which is going to wake you up. And so you can feel wired and wide awake from that cortisol. And this is a common reason why many of my clients are waking up around 1 or 2 a.m. and having a hard time falling back asleep. So it's really important to keep blood sugar levels steady throughout the day so that they stay steady at night as well. Now, the key to maintaining steady blood sugar levels is to, first of all, you want to avoid refined carbohydrates and sugars. So in things like pasta, bread, pastries, candy, and sweets. You definitely want to eliminate processed foods that tend to be high in refined sugars and carbohydrates. You probably need to reduce your carbohydrate intake and eat according to your metabolic type, which I'm going to talk about next. It can help to increase healthy fats and reduce foods that quickly convert to glucose. So things like grains, legumes, white potatoes, and high glycemic fruits. And those fruits are like, think of as a tropical fruits, bananas, mangoes, things like that are pretty high in sugar. Now, I do want to point out that even if you don't eat many refined carbohydrates or sugars, your blood sugar system could be dysregulated from other systems in your body being out of balance, especially if your hormones are out of balance. And if you aren't sleeping well, then I also see blood sugar dysregulation because our body's supposed to regulate that while we sleep. So sometimes for my clients, I recommend a supplement to help stabilize their blood sugar while we make these dietary changes. Now, if you do think that blood sugar is disturbing your sleep, then a snack before bed can keep it from falling too low in the night and waking you up. So 100 to 200 calorie snack with complex carbohydrates, protein, and fat. So for example, an apple and almond butter would be a great choice. Now, the metabolic typing diet means eating the correct balance of macronutrients. So that's that fat, protein, and carbs for your metabolism. And that's really key to being healthy, to keeping your blood sugar level steady so that you can sleep well. So according to the metabolic typing diet, there are 3 types of ideal diets. One that's more protein-based, one that's more carbohydrate-based, and one that is mixed. And each type has its ideal ratios of fat, protein, and carbs that you should eat. And this is important because say your body's meant to run on more carbs and you're giving it too much fat and protein, it's actually going to slow you down. It's going to make you feel tired and can cause cravings for sweets because it wants more quick energy. And if your body needs more protein and fat for fuel and you're eating too many carbs, then that's like injecting rocket fuel into your system. So your energy is going to spike, which can feel like anxiety, and then it's going to crash, which will make you feel tired and depleted. And so being on that roller coaster ride is going to trigger hormone fluctuations and, varying energy that can cause weight gain and poor sleep. So you can find out your ideal metabolic type by going to mtdiet.com. There are also some free quizzes that you could look up on the internet as well to find that. And then what I do is I give my clients a food balance log that they use for a couple meals to keep track of how they're feeling after every meal and refine that even farther. So assessing how you feel after each meal and then fine-tuning your food ratios based on your body's feedback is going to help you figure out your perfect ratios so that you have consistent energy all day and then can also sleep well at night. Now, it's really important to eat nutrient-dense foods. And nutrient density isn't just how many nutrients there are per calorie. bioavailability, or how available those nutrients are to our body, and whether or not they're anti-nutrients, also is part of the formula for determining nutrient density. So foods like grains and legumes that often make up the majority of calories in a person's diet are actually quite low in nutrient density because they don't have as many nutrients, and they are actually high in what are called anti-nutrients. So these are things like enzyme inhibitors and phytic acid and oxalic acid that actually bind to the nutrients that we want in that grain or legume or whatever it is. And so they aren't actually available to us. So some of the most nutrient dense foods might surprise you. It's things like raw cacao, organ meats, which if you don't like eating liver or whatever, then that can be from a supplement. There are some great organ complex supplements out there. Grass-fed butter, if you're not sensitive to dairy, seafood and fish, herbs and spices, and nuts and seeds if they're properly prepared, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. So it's also really important to have an anti-inflammatory diet. Lowering inflammation is really the key to sleeping better and healing your gut. So you really want to avoid inflammatory foods. So this is going to include foods you're sensitive to, and also alcohol, refined sugar, and processed foods. So those are going to be the most inflammatory foods that I suggest avoiding as much as possible if you aren't sleeping well. Now, this also means cooking at home as much as possible so you can control what you eat. Restaurants use inflammatory oils, they use aluminum cookware, and they're not usually cooking with organic foods, and they're more likely to be contaminated with foods you might be sensitive to, especially gluten. Now, if you have an autoimmune disease, such as Hashimoto's, which quite a few of my clients do, then I suggest following the autoimmune paleo diet or the AIP diet and avoiding all inflammatory foods that I'll tell you for 60 to 90 days, even if they don't show up on a food sensitivity test. So that's going to be dairy, non-gluten grains, corn, refined sugar, alcohol, gluten, processed food, eggs, and nightshades. Now, it's also really important to properly prepare grain, legumes, nuts, and seeds. Historically, every culture on earth has had a process to prepare these foods to make them more digestible. They either fermented them, so think of sourdough bread. They sprouted them, or they soaked these foods to break down the starches and to remove those anti-nutrients that I talked about. And this is going to make those nutrients in the foods, the vitamins and minerals, more available to us. So the easiest way to properly prepare grains and legumes is to soak them for at least 8 hours with warm filtered water and 2 tablespoons of whey, apple cider vinegar, or lemon juice. The whey, apple cider vinegar, or lemon juice helps break down those enzyme inhibitors. So if I know I'm going to cook rice or lentils for dinner, for example, then I'll start soaking them in the morning. And it can take a little bit more planning, but now I'm in the habit of it, and so it's pretty easy and I don't think too much about it. All right, so eating organic, non-GMO, and grass-fed and wild meats and seafood is also really important. So my goal with my clients is to reduce stress as much as possible in the body. And that means lowering toxins and inflammation as much as possible. And so to do this, it's important to eat food that doesn't have pesticides, hormones, and other toxins. So eating organic, non-GMO vegetables, fruit, and grains is extremely important. And then grass-fed meats and wild-caught seafood also have fewer toxins and more nutrients. Now, I recommend the Environmental Working Group, or EWG.org, has lists of produce. They have the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15 that they use they change it every year and rate for the Dirty Dozen the 12 produce items with the most pesticides. And then the clean 15 is the ones with the least pesticides. And so then you can use that to spend your money on buying organic for the ones with the most pesticides and not worry as much for the clean 15. Now, buying locally, especially produce and meat, so you know where it comes from, is really the best way to ensure you're getting quality food. But if you don't have access to that, then there are quite a few online companies that sell quality meat and seafood. So that's also an option. And I know that it can be more expensive up front to buy quality food, but it's actually going to save you money in healthcare in the long term. So I really suggest making this a priority. Now let's talk about some special diets. There's a big trend for plant-based diets these days, and there are certain nutrients that are found almost exclusively in animal foods. So especially the fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K are mainly found in animal foods. And these vitamins help make a lot of our hormones and neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, and melatonin that help us feel good and sleep. And you can't get all these necessary nutrients very easily without supplementation from a plant-based diet. Now, you don't have to eat a lot of meat as we think of it, like we think of meat as steak or chicken breast, but animal foods in the form of fats like butter and full-fat dairy, if tolerated, eggs and organ meats can supply, again, these are nutrient-dense foods and they can supply a lot of nutrients for you. Now, low carb and ketogenic diets honestly can also ruin your sleep, especially if you aren't a protein type and you are more of a carbohydrate type or a mixed type and you need more carbs. So everyone is different. There's no one diet, again, that's good for everyone. So I don't agree that everyone can benefit from keto and everyone can benefit from low carb. It actually helps to have some carbohydrates at night with dinner so that your body releases insulin. Insulin actually helps clear out the amino acids that compete with tryptophan. And at night you want tryptophan because it converts to serotonin and melatonin, which helps you relax and go to sleep. Now, I also want to talk about intermittent fasting. So this has also become a new health craze, especially for weight loss and to stabilize blood sugar. And I do think that it can be of benefit to healthy people, but I also can believe that it can be harmful if you aren't in perfect health, especially if you aren't sleeping. So first of all, our body uses the cues of light and also food to set our body clock every day. And so it helps to eat breakfast to set that circadian rhythm. And let's say that you are hungry first thing in the morning, your body's telling you that it needs fuel. And if you ignore it, your blood sugar is going to drop, your body's going to feel stressed, and it's going to release cortisol. And so then you're starting your day off with higher cortisol than should be. And if you aren't sleeping well already, then that excess cortisol is going to put your body even more out of whack and interfere with your sleep the next night. So I just think that adding intermittent fasting to insomnia is more stress than the body can handle. So as you can see, there's a lot going on. This is 20 minutes of talking about diet and sleep, but these are the things that I suggest looking at. And most of these are things that you can do on your own without doing any testing, without even needing to hire me. So I highly suggest that you really focus on anti-inflammatory foods, high quality foods, nutrient-dense foods as one of the first things to do to improve your sleep. All right, everyone, thanks for listening, and I will see you in the group soon.